Welcome back to Elephant Den. 1962's Harakiri, directed by Masaki Kobayashi, is set during the Edo period and the rule of Tokugawa shogunate. We follow a ronin named Hanshiro Tsugumo, played by Tatsuya Nakadai, who arrives at the estate of Lee, requesting to commit seppuku, and using the opportunity to explain the events that drove him to death before an audience of samurai.
This movie, along with Seven Samurai, I think are perfect films. I'm so excited to talk about it with you.
I'm so excited.
These films are so rare, almost non-existent these days, where it takes you on this journey that subverts your expectations constantly. 30 minutes into it, you're like, this should be the finale.
No, exactly.
And then it just turns at 180. The cinematography, for its time, so modern, decades ahead of its time. Similar to Seven Samurai, we see the influence it's had on other films we've loved, from westerns to modern action revenge thrillers. It's really the grandfather. And it's so interesting for the backdrop to be the Japanese culture, something so rich and old with, the roots so deep. And it adds to the gravity of the whole situation of this one particular Ronin story that we're following.
The first question I have is Harakiri being known now as an anti-samurai film because of how, like what you said, it subverts your expectations of what you expect of a samurai, idolizing the samurai for the warriorness of it. This film doesn't portray that. It's an anti-samurai film. So I just wonder how it's possible for this film to be arguably one of the best samurai films in cinema history.
A lot of audiences, Western audiences especially, will go into a film like this expecting the badassery of the samurai.
Sorry, just to note, especially with the ritual of seppuku, right? And doing harakiri, right? Is initially why people would approach this film just based on the title.
I'm guilty of that.
Exactly.
I was I know what that is, and it's all based in samurai code and honor and honorable death. Yet, it kind of throws that back at you. You get everything you expect and want, knowing what a Westerner knows of samurai in this film. Those things happen right from the duel, the rituals. However, how it unfolds is what's very interesting. It's a more intimate story following this Ronin. It immediately captivates you by his purpose of entering this clan's home and requesting to have this ritual. Immediately it's established that at this time in Japan, there's peace throughout. Yet, for the samurai, who are now masterless, also known as Ronin, they're essentially wanderers, they're jobless. The time of peace for them is their struggle. What some of these Ronin would do is present themselves to these estates and request harakiri, but really not intend for that.
Right,
expecting to be charioted money. Immediately that flips this whole code of honor that the samurai have on its head, and it's a con essentially that they're doing. The film again, it establishes that the estates have caught on to this con.
And the film does that by using the story of Motome Chijiwa, the
son-in-law
of the main character Tsugumo.
As the story unravels and you get deeper into the motivation of the protagonist and what brought him there, all these rituals of the samurai, including the harakiri, you see in a complete new perspective. Yet the film continues to be engaging because you're figuring out the protagonist's motivations
Right.
all the way up until the end. So, for instance, the film opens with showing establishing shots of the interior of this estate where the protagonist is gonna bring himself to. And we see the red armor. It's kind of the centerpiece that the clan worships.
My initial reaction of it, I think, with the smoke, it had
There
some
was a
kind of like smoke
effect, yeah.
effect in it.
Very dramatic.
It was dramatic.
Establishing
It
shot.
was intimidating. To me, it reminded me of the Oni, which is a Japanese devil monster. And I feel like that for that purpose, it was meant to be intimidating.
Whether you're Japanese or not, you go into this film with an expectation of what you believe to know as the samurai code, the honor, the discipline, the armor that you see in the establishing shots of the film present that intimidation and respect.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, that too gets completely subverted. And it goes to show you through this individual's journey, code of honor amongst an individual has virtue, but code of honor amongst a group, a clan, or a gang, a community can lead to complete madness. For a group to uphold values can completely go against someone's individual path.
I mean, it's exactly what happens to the main character in the film.
It's very
Tsukumo,
tragic.
when he is all of a sudden faced with two codes, basically, the code of the samurai and the code of his family. And that's shown in the scene, I think one of the most beautiful, captivating scenes in the film was when we learned that Chizuya, the son-in-law of the main character, sells his sword, his samurai sword, in the pawn shop for money to be able to save his family.
Even after learning of this new concept of Ronin conning these estates for money, even that weak act can be explained, and for good reason, but they didn't give him a chance. And how often do we see that but not really understand what's going on in life, where a person doesn't have the chance to explain themselves, and people assume, and then you have this the gang mentality, the mob mentality, just trap him. So it's very tragic, and it's very true to any human's individual journey in life, right?
Yeah,
Potentially.
it definitely cuts deep and becomes relevant to what we experience every day.
In answer to the question, I think it's because the movie is still able to showcase these principles that these people of time had, and how those principles can go against even more important things, or go against themselves.
Exactly.
So it teaches you so much, yet it shows you how it's completely backwards when it comes to individual people.
Exactly. Because we grow up being taught certain principles and we don't even know why we do them, right? Like, we don't even know why we follow through with some of the things that we do. And that's why I love that this goes to question those principles and, like, where it really matters.
And you see how delicate it is when you think you're standing for something that's right, and then you cross into evil, essentially, by doing very inhumane things to other people, as you see the crimes essentially committed that go seemingly unanswered. And I hope we get into that too, how these tragedies get swept under the rug.
That leads to my next question perfectly. The main character in Harakiri, Hanshiro Tsugumo, is a man who lost everything. And we later find out that his intentions of coming into the Lee clan was for vengeance. I want to bring this into connection with what's going on in today and what we've been seeing in the news, notably the shooting that happened in Maine that killed 18 people. I want to bring the shooter and Tsugumo into comparison because they're both men who lost, from what we know, lost everything. They both appeared to make a point, and they both ended up killing themselves in the end. I want to talk about what kind of revenge story Harakiri is compared to this man killing 18 people in Maine, USA.
There's so many parallels there, right? Like you mentioned, two men who seemingly lost everything. Yet, what was their intention? Both of them enter an institution. In Harakiri, he's entering this estate of a clan that stands for the Samurai Code. In Maine, we had the shooter who entered, from what I understand, a bowling alley and a bar where he met his ex-wife or ex-girlfriend who he was broken up about. The way the two go about their revenge and making their point is very different, though. The main difference being to choose violence. That's why one you can seemingly not understand, where the other you could applaud, and that should be obvious. In Harakiri, the protagonist's intentions was not to kill.
No, he had no intention.
You may think that as you're watching the film, because there are scenes by the end especially where the violence breaks out, and I'm sure that's what a lot of people are waiting for when watching a samurai film, and unfortunately maybe that's what they end up taking away from it. His method of revenge was to tell his story. That was his main goal. Whether he knew he was going to die or not, or if there would be collateral damage with casualties.
Right, because he came in knowing he had nothing to lose.
First of all, you see that in this actor's performance. You really see a disheveled man with the sullen eyes, the lines in his face. He's gone through it. You see it. It's a remarkable performance. But the confidence that he goes in with and how he unravels his story is so captivating. Again, his main motivation was to tell a story, to prove to this clan that the samurai code, the atrocities that they committed following their code. And not to get off track too much, but even in the sequences of action where you have these two samurais dueling, and it's so epic. It's exactly what you want, from the real swords that they're using, from the elements of the wind, perfectly captivating the movements of them, the samurai, and the camera motions, which I alluded to before, are so modern. He doesn't kill the other samurai.
No.
He does...
Even better.
He does even better. He breaks his sword, which has huge symbolic meaning in Japanese culture. The when your sword breaks, your katana, and he manages to slice his hair,
his ponytail,
his top knot off.
Yeah, which goes to show you his capabilities as well as a samurai. And I'm sure I think the film even pointed that out, was that it was more humiliating, instead of your head being cut off, to have your top knot be cut off, because you already know that he was capable of decapitating you.
Yeah.
But then to be able to slice off your top knot is even more skillful. So
much so that the opponent ends up killing himself. I love that he didn't resort to violence. He wasn't intending to be violent until they had no choice, because he proves his point by telling his story, and their answer isn't to apologize or admit to their wrongdoings. They call him a madman. They become defensive. And then they unleash on him. It's a very beautiful image of this yard that they're in, where he's on a white mat. Essentially, it's his stage to tell his story.
Yeah.
And surrounding him is the counselor and this clan of obedient followers who listen to his whole story like us, yet they're so trained, so coded to the samurai ways that they still choose when they're commanded to unleash on him and kill him. And that's when there's quite a big battle sequence.
Well, and that's when the violence is forced upon.
In defense, he kills a few of these followers of the estate, and at one point he grabs the red armor in defense, very symbolic of the hollow. There's no man in the armor. The code of the samurai is very hollow and shallow.
It's empty.
It's an empty promise of virtue. He ends up discarding it on the ground, and it's almost a sense of mockery and disrespect for this code of samurai that he completely debunked. Getting back to current real life situation which happened, the tragedy in Maine, where you had this madman, and I don't know this man. You could only imagine his mental state and whatever his reasonings were. There's obviously no sense in how he decided to go about things. He thought, I guess, that the more people he hurt, the louder his tragedy, his own tragedy would be.
Which is unfortunate because he chose violence. And yet people notice that more.
All of North America was talking about this Maine shooter and the manhunt and how many people now are dead, and it's all over the news, and what you're left with is just you feel completely empty, and of course it's tragic, but for what reason you can't understand, and what point did what was his proof? And it was nothing. But what's most impactful about Harakiri's the story in the film is how it concludes after the big fight. Is you see how the estate, this counselor, chooses to clean up, quite literally and metaphorically. They cover all their tracks. They pick up the armor, this hollow armor where it once stood, like it still uphold their code, and they amongst each other say, no one will hear of the truth here. We will say that we allowed these men to perform harakiri as they requested. The other casualties were of mere illness, and that's all ever people will know.
It concludes with the shot of the hollow shell of the samurai,
giving you a complete different perspective from what you came into. The whole meaning here is so relevant to not just Japan or that period of Japan, it's to life itself. You wonder how corrupt things really are, how these things you don't ever end up knowing or hearing of because the higher ups conceal, they cover their tracks.
It will always be relevant when we have an authoritarian regime.
Right, and whatever side you stand on, even if you're indifferent, whether you could say a liberal or a Republican, a conservative, if anything is taken to an extreme, radical in nature, then it's gonna have negative repercussions. And this film beautifully showcases those repercussions in one man's story. When I say I love film and what I take away from films, yeah, there's some that are entertaining or that make you think of a particular sequence or you wonder how they did it, but this one is really, when we said perfect and timeless in what it's conveying in the message, it's why it's a cinematic achievement and a great piece of art. This is what you need to enrich your life with, and for it to do it in a normal runtime, right? It's not asking a lot of you.
And for those of you who have it in your Letterboxd watch list, this is your sign to go and watch this film. Because those who have had it in their watch list for a long time always regret not watching this movie sooner. So, go watch Harakiri. And with that, we will conclude our video. If you like what you see and you like our channel, please comment, like, share our video, follow us on other social media platforms. We have Instagram, Letterboxd, and TikTok.
Subscribe if you'd like to.
Our handle is @AshleyandAlex.
I got goosebumps just talking about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Till next time.
You're awesome.